Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures, and today we're doing part 177 of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights, where we take a look at some of the wonderful mods people are making and use them to talk about some of the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. So today we're going to be doing a couple extras. So we've got an extra animal today because we're going to be finishing off from last time's tarantula packs from Narwhalo, and then we've got the Halloween pack done by GreatCakesMod, who's added 4 really wonderful animals. They're now all standalones, but when I downloaded it, it was the Halloween pack, so they're all part of the Halloween pack. But yeah, we'll get into that, so really excited to get stuck into there. But we're going to be starting off first with the tarantulas. So we've got 4 tarantulas today. We're going to be starting off with the green bottle blue tarantula. So let's have a look at these guys. That's a really nice one, but we want to see in... yeah, look at how beautiful. You can kind of see where they get their name. So the scientific name of their genus is Chromatopelma. It was Chromatopelma cyanpubescens. So these guys are a monotypic genus of South American tarantula that contains the single species that is commonly known as the green bottle blue tarantula, due to its metallic blue legs and blue-green carapace, as you can kind of see there. They're a very active species of tarantula and fast-growing, and are particularly attractive to hobbyists, probably because their colour and active, that makes them more interesting. And they are native to the Paraguay Peninsula. So in terms of their habitat, they live in webbed burrows under bushes and tree roots in deserts and areas of northern Venezuela. So their entrance is often extended with webbing and sometimes resembles a funnel shape. And their webs may protect the entrance from harsh desert climate, but they act as a trap for insects, and their diet contains many things such as crickets, cockroaches, and sometimes even worms. So pretty much anything small invertebrates, really. Though in 2013, Venezuelan scientists announced that green bottle blues were threatened by overgrazing, that is, destroying their habitat. Fumigation of cultivated lands also caused the migration of the species towards the Montecano Biological Reserve and the Cerro Santa Ana National Monument, and in 2015 they were listed as an endangered species. That's quite sad, but a little bit interesting about the taxonomy as well. They were first described by Inbrick Stand in 1907 under the name Aeropalma cytopudens, and then they moved from this genus and these into Delopalma, but then is now considered to be its own genus in 1997, with Gunter Schmidt successfully considering the species distinct enough to warrant its own genus. So then it was named an own genus then. So yeah, it's quite cool. So let's just have a look quickly at the Zoopedia and see if there's anything else interesting to say. I always like to check. As I mentioned, they are endangered. Yeah, green bottles extend their webs slightly above the ground. Obtain all their hydration exclusively from the prey they can consume. Not surprised there. The Taurus have been a very fast-growing species, and they may reach maturity till 8 months for males, while females take 3 years. And yeah, they're listed and endangered, as I mentioned. And they're also kind of semi-arboreal. That's interesting. A really, really cute little guy. Another great one by Narwhalo. So next up, we have got the Guatemalan tiger rump tarantula. So that's living right here. Let's have a look at this guy. Let's see if we can find... There we are. You can kind of see where it gets its name from. So its scientific name is Darvis palators, also named the Guatemalan tiger rump. So these guys are a terrestrial opportunistic burrower, so they will burrow, and they are found in the New World. So they mentioned they are found in southern Mexico and Guatemala. Their body length is about 2 inches or 5 centimeters, and their leg span is about 4.75 inches or about 12 centimeters. So this species, also known as the Guatemalan tiger, this is a New World terrestrial tarantula and opportunistic burrower. The species is from southern Mexico and Guatemala, which is a warm and temperate area with temperatures really going above 82 degrees Fahrenheit. Males of the species only live about 2.5 to 3 years, while the females can live up to about 11 years, with females growing at 4 to 4.5 inches, with most seeming to top out at 4 inches. The only really sexual dimorphism in this species is size, so to determine the sex of your tarantula, or the tarantula, you'll need to examine a fresh molt or wait for the males to mature, so emerging its molt are the tribute hooks and palpal bulbs. And they should not be confused with other species like Darvis fantasticus because of its dark or black carapace. And you can see it gets a tiger rump there because of the stripes on its back. It's very interesting. It's also firmly established in the tarantula hobby. So they're known for being docile and skittish at times, but being a New World tarantula, they do not have significant venom, or medically significant venom. but they do have undulating hairs that they can spray at you, and that can be very irritating, so you got to be very careful, especially if it gets in your eyes and mouth. It can cause serious problems, so you got to be careful with that. They do have amazing feed response, things like that. So yeah, really, really cool species. So let's see if we can find out some more information, because a lot of this that I've found here is just more about information about keeping them, which we're not too worried about. We want to find out some other more information. Yeah, and again, endangered, which is a little bit sad. So they're quite fast and use their chelicerae to trap small insects such as locusts and crickets. That makes sense. They do have a troubled taxonomic history, being reclassified other genera such as Sargassum and Hapalis, which is interesting. This is a cool one there. So, Guatemalan tiger rump tarantulas exhibit high morphological variation. This is suspected to be evidence that the species is actually species complex. So a species complex is when we think it's one species, but there are actually multiple species within that, and it's likely that they're going to find that soon. That's quite interesting as well. Molecular analysis employing mtDNA, or mitochondrial DNA, led to the recognition of 13 clearly distinguishable features, with 12 of them being new to science. That'll be very interesting there. And the patterning of the tiger rump tarantula serves as a warning to potential predators, although their bite is harmless, similar to other tarantulas from Central America. So, yeah, don't worry about you got to worry about them. More about the hairs, not much about their bite, but obviously still, you don't want to get bitten by these guys because they've got huge fangs and huge chelicerae, so you don't want to mess with them. But again, that is the tiger rump, Guatemalan tiger rump. Next up, we've got the Indian ornamental tarantula, which is a really cool one actually. So let's have a look and see if we can find one in a really nice place. This is really nice colors. I love the colors on this guy. So this is related to the the Guti sapphire tarantula, same genus of Polythera regalis. These guys are a species of arboreal tarantula that is found in parts of India, and the common name of this species is the Indian ornamental tree spider, or the Indian ornamental, and it's actually one of the most popular arboreal tarantulas in amateur collections. And the leg span exceeds 7 centimeters, or about 7 inches or 18 centimeters. So the genus name, it means pretty much just Polycus, which is spotted. Therian means wild beast. So it is the spotted wild beast, and regalis refers to royal. And the whole genus, including, as I mentioned, the Guti sapphire, all have these kind of really interesting fractal-like patterns. And the spider's natural habitat is around Southeast Asia. In terms of its behavior, these guys are very similar to most other species of arboreal spiders. In the wild, they live in holes in tall trees, where they make asymmetrical funnel webs. Their primary prey consists of various flying insects, which they seize in flight and paralyze. And it's actually not unknown for the species of genus to live communally within a territory, i.e. the number of holes per tree is limited. And they tend to be quite defensive spiders. So in terms of their bites, although there's never been a recorded death from a tarantula bite, the species does have a medically significant bite, with venom that may cause intense pain, judging from the experience of keepers bitten by other spiders from this genus. They move rapidly, and although they generally prefer flight to fight, they may attack when cornered. In addition to the direct effects of the venom, their large fangs can produce puncture wounds that can lead to secondary bacterial infections if not treated properly. And there have never been a single report of a case of anaphylactic shock from tarantula venom, as it likely does not actually contain the proteins needed to enact a potential deadly allergic reaction. So yeah, it's still large animal, large fangs that can hurt you, but yeah, you got to be careful as well as the medically significant venom. But in captivity, they are a popular pet. Despite their speed and potent venom, they're often sought out because of their really beautiful appearance, and I do think they look rather beautiful. This would probably be a species of tarantula I would have if I was allowed to keep tarantulas. Most of the tarantulas I've worked with have been with zoos. Polyga regalis is fed crickets, grasshoppers, and the adult specimen can be occasionally fed small rodents in captivity. And the female specimen can live up to about 12 years, while males have a shorter lifespan, about 3 to 5 years, typical of other tarantulas. So yeah, another really, really cool species. We'll have a look at the Zoopedia and see if we can find any more information. Yeah, we mentioned that. Crepuscular ambush hunters, they come out at dusk and dawn. Mentioned that. Commonly called pokies in the hobby, that makes sense. And when threatened, they'll flash their bright yellow markings on the underside of their legs to warn off predators. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, brilliant. Definitely a big fan. I love these little guys. Nice to see some of these guys getting some love. And you can see those under the body there. Let's see if we can see that there. Look at that. So this big fangs there. Really, really nice model. That's brilliant. No, well, always knocking it out of the park. So our last tarantula for today, I'm sure you're excited to hear that. Our last tarantula. We have got we got Pamophobus macula, or the purple bloom tarantula. So let's have a look at these guys. Purple bloom. Look at how pretty these guys are. Or the Ecuador bloom. So these guys are a striking tarantula with stunning colors, especially in mature males. So they've got this, you can see this iridescent sheen. That's a really bluish color. And has a powerful presence, and and is a true gem to any collector's hobby. But yeah, just a beautiful animal. Actually, one of the larger species in the Phamophobus genus. It is actually appreciated typically for its robust size and dynamic feeding response. And it's actually recommended, if you want to keep this as a pet, it's recommended for keepers who love impressive growth and bold behaviors from their tarantulas. So in terms of the in-depth facts, this is actually not a described species yet. It's it's a spur, so it's the kind of the one. It's the Macala giant, the purple bloom tarantula, or the Ecuador bloom tarantula. So it's located in Ecuador and is specifically from the Machala region. So it is from that place. Category, it is terrestrial, known for actually moderate webbing and occasional burrowing tendencies. Their sizes, females can reach about 9 inches, while males typically say about 6 to 7 inches. So they're decently big size, I think that's 2.5. Oh, I can't do the maths in my head. And like other New World tarantulas, they do have undulating hairs. And their growth rate, they're kind of fast growers compared to other species and reach impressive size quite quickly. In lifespans, females can live for 20 years or more, while males live about 4 to 5 years. And they're ideal for keepers with some experience with their size, fast growth, and bold nature. Be a really, really cool species. They typically prefer temperatures of about 75 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit, or 24 to 29 degrees, and warmer temperatures will lead to more frequent feeding and fast growth and quicker molts. They like high humidity, about 70 to 80%. And water bowls can be used, but you don't need them, as long as you just keep the humidity up. Housing, they do like decent enclosure for something like enclosure 2 or 3 times their size, so they can just have a nice burrow there. In diet, they can be fed all sorts of crickets and cockroaches. In the wild, they pretty much eat anything smaller than them, but in captivity, that's probably what you'd most likely feed them. But yeah, really, really cool species. Let's have a look at their Zoopedia. Let's see if we can find more information. So this is cool. Only male purple blue tarantulas have their striking purple shine. Females are duller and usually completely brown in color. That does make sense, because the males are going to be the impressive ones. Purple bloom tarantulas are often classified as Phamophobus spur macula in the pet trade, referring to the city of Machala in southern Ecuador. So that makes sense because they are not described as a full species yet. When they say spur, it is a species, and that specific locale they kind of refer to, until it's described with a true scientific species name. Purple bloom tarantulas are quite voracious and will hunt several small insects in just one night, often actively chasing prey, so that's quite an interesting one. Purple bloom tarantulas can sometimes be found living in burrows alongside small frogs of the genus Genamalites, which is the nature of this relationship. So if you've heard of those little frogs that live in their burrows, that is believed to be a symbiotic relationship where the little frog will protect the eggs from any insects that try to eat them, but also the tarantula will protect the frog from predators. So it seems to be some sort of really cool symbiotic relationship. And what's really cool is also juvenile purple blooms have a characteristic red abdomen with a black Christmas tree marking. So that's also really, really cool. And it's nice to see that we got all these tarantula species. So yeah, that's Narawala done. So that's brilliant. So we're going to be starting off with the Halloween pack. So this is all done by GreatCakesMods. So we'll have a look at the first animal. We've got the grey four-eyed opossum. So let's have a look at these cute little guys. Let's see if we can find the adult, because we had lots of babies. There's an adult there. Another really, really cool guy. So this is the grey four-eyed opossum. So these guys are Philander opossum. These are an opossum species found in Guatemala, Suriname, French Guiana, and northern Brazil at altitudes of about sea level to 1,600 meters, but generally below 1,000 meters. So they typically live in a primary, secondary, or disturbed forest, and one of the many opossum species, because we all just think of, the Virginia opossum in North America, but South America has many different species of opossum. So in terms of its description, it's got a sharply defined white spot on above each eye, hence the common name. It has a bicolored tail, which is prehensile. and with the pale part being like pale and the longer dark being grey. So you can see like it's lighter near the end, which is interesting. Its dorsal fur is grey, while its ventral fur, throat, and cheeks are cream coloured. Adults have ears that are black except at the base, and wild specimens can get between 200 and 647 grams, or 7 to 23 ounces, or captive specimens can actually weigh up to 1.5 kilograms, or 3.3 pounds. Body lengths range from 22 to 33 centimeters, so about 8.7 to 13 inches, with a tail of similar size, about 19 to 35 centimeters, or about 7 to 14 inches. So this species is a nocturnal, solitary, and partly arboreal. So they come in at night, they like to hang out by themselves, and they do live in the trees partly. They're usually found in moist areas, often near streams. Although it wanders into many different vegetation types, it is a good swimmer. The grey four-eyed opossum does not have a well-defined territory, and home ranges stability depends on the available of resources. And they are omnivores, so they'll feed on all sorts of things, such as small animals, vegetation, leaves, fruits, and seeds. And unlike other species like the Virginia opossum, they do not play dead. So they don't play dead. Instead, they'll be quite aggressive and fight back against predators. And some displays of aggression includes opening their mouth wide and hissing, and is known to be the fiercest fighter of all the opossums, and being a nocturnal animal and can be active during the day. Although it's terrestrial, it's very good at climbing and swimming, and it has agile, swift movements that seem to be more alert than other species of didelphids, which, as mentioned, they are marsupials. And they often will build nests in out of dry leaves and hollow trees, tree forks, fallen logs, and in ground burrows. They roll up in a ball when sleeping, and although their eyes are closed, the white patches of their fur give the appearance of an awake animal, so that's quite cool. And we'll talk about reproduction, because look at how cute these little guys are. So these little opossums, little is known about how they breed, but the fact that they are from the family Didelphidae, so they are an opossum, means they're most likely polygamous. This means the males compete with other males, and there's no courtship displays or pair bonds found in the species. Reproduction is typically seasonal, with more young being born during the raining season when there's abundance of fruit, but during the dry season, fewer babies are born because of lack of available fruit. Litter size averages between 4 to 5 young, with each female producing 2 to 4 litters per year, so they do breed a lot, being marsupials. Many young will die while nursing in their mother's pouch, and their death rate is especially high during the dry season. And there are many deaths when their mother is less than 11 months old. The average gestation period for grey four-eyed possum is about 13 to 14 days, so about 2 weeks. And each newborn weighs about 9 grams. And then they nurse in their mother's pouch for about 68 to 75 days. And once weaned, they stay in their mother's nest for a further 8 to 15 days before their mother becomes aggressive and expels them. So in terms of their diet, the grey four-eyed opossum has an omnivorous diet, mainly feeding on nectar, fruits, insects, small mammals such as mice, reptiles, amphibians, crustaceans, snails, and earthworms. So very varied diet, and it varies between the seasons. So yeah, with such a varied diet, they actually will both encounter and eat venomous snakes. And while the bite of these snakes may be harmful to most animals, they're actually able to overcome the toxic bites of these snakes, which may be harmful to most animals, but they're able to come over them because they're immune to them, which is interesting. And this immunity was actually thought to be from an immune response leading to production of antibodies, but actually in fact comes from a toxin neutralizing proteins that actually found in these opossums. So they do actually neutralize the toxins. These proteins are produced by the opossum prior to any encounter with a venomous snake. Thus, this immunity is not learned but inherited. So they do, which is very interesting. They inherit, they actually are immune to a lot of snake bites, which is pretty cool. Just in terms of their range, this species is found throughout the eastern Amazonia and the Guineas, and in Guyana, Suriname, French Guiana, and Brazil. And in Brazil, they're found east of the Rio Negro and the Rio Moderna, and they may actually occur in Venezuela as well. And we'll talk a little bit about subspecies taxonomy. So this species was originally described in the genus Didelphis by Carl Linnaeus. In the 1950s, all members of Philander were thought to be subspecies or synonyms of species, but they would all be split. So there's 3 different species that have been split from these species. So we have a lot more opossum species in the world now, which is great. Because often, we're reaching that point where we're actually able to look at genetics and see things that are different. But yeah, really, really cool species. And definitely great for the spooky season, because you can tell it's got a bit of a spooky look to him. Hell great. So we'll be carrying on. So we got another one. This is an animal that has already been made by Leaf, but GreatCakesMod, took a shot at it. And we'll look at the cute little playing there. How cute is that? But here, we've got the jungle cat. So let's have a look at the jungle cat. Also, Felis charis. And they're also known as the reef or the swamp cat. They're a medium-sized cat native to the eastern Mediterranean and the Caucasus, as part of the parts of Central, South, and Southeast Asia, where they typically live in wetlands like swamps, littoral, and riparian areas with dense vegetation. And they are listed as the least concerned by the IUCN, but they are threatened by a lot of things. We'll get into that. So in terms of the taxonomy, they were actually described by the Baltic German naturalist Johann Anton Gurdestad, who actually found one on the southern frontier of the Russian Empire, and then it was named as its own species. And yeah, we won't go too much into that, but they are considered the most basal of the genus Felis. So they have the genus Felis and then all the other things like the Blackfoot cat, the sand cat, the European wild cat. So they are the most basal of that genus. So the oldest member of Felis. But they're also the biggest too. So they're a medium-sized long-legged cat and the largest living member of the genus Felis. So they are in the same genus as domestic cats. Their head to body length is between about 59 and 76 centimeters, or about 23 to 30 inches, and stand about 14 inches or 36 centimeters tall at the shoulder and weigh between 2 to 16 kilograms, or 4.4 to 35.3 pounds. And this typically, the size decreases from west to east, as believed to be, as the east they go, they've got to compete with other species like fishing cats and other species like bay-spotted cats and things like that. They've got to compete with other species. And they also show a body size decrease going down from northern latitude to the tropics. So it seems to be the largest ones will be at the coldest areas of like the Western Caucasus, where there's less competition. They are sexually dimorphic, with females tending to be smaller and lighter than the females. And their face is actually quite long and narrow, with a white muzzle. And they've got large pointed ears that are between 4.5 to 8 centimeters, or 1.8 to 3.1 inches in length, and reddish brown to the back, and are quite set close together. They also have a small tuft of black hairs, nearly 15 millimeters on the tip of both ears. And you can see their eyes have yellow irises and elliptical pupils, with white lines can be seen across those eyes. And dark lines run from the corner of their eyes down the sides of it and form a dark patch to match their nose. And their skull is quite broad in the region of the zygomatic arch, as they seem to have quite big round heads, which makes them look pretty cute. So their coat, as you can see, is kind of sandy, reddish brown or grey, and is uniformly coloured with no spots. Though there have been melanistic and albino individuals seen in India, with white cats being found in the Western Ghats, which is like the red eyes of true albinos, so that must be a genetic thing, potentially inbreeding. So kittens, we'll have a look at the kitten. Where is the kitten going? There he is. So kittens are striped and spotted, and adults may retain some of these markings. So there's little extra stripes and spots, such as some of those markings they may retain. Dark tipped hairs cover the body, giving the cat a spectacled appearance. And the fur is denser on the back compared to the underparts. And there's two molts observed in the year, with the coat being rougher and lighter in the summer than in the winter. And the insides of the forelegs show about 5 rings, and faint markings can be seen on the outside. They have a black tipped tail that can be between 21 and 36 centimeters, or 8.3 to 14.2 inches long. They have 2 or 3 dark rings around the last third of its length. And their paw prints, you've got quite a big paw prints, about 5 centimeters by 6 centimeters, and they can cover about a foot in a step, which is pretty cool. So in terms of their distribution habitat, as I said, they can be found in the Middle East, the Caucasus, the Indian subcontinent, down to Southeast Asia, Sri Lanka, and southern China. So quite a wide range. And a habitat generalist, they do prefer other areas that are like swamp, wetlands, and things like that, grasslands and shrubs. There are also common agricultural lands, such as fields of beans and sugarcane across its range, and actually have been sited against settlements. And as reeds and tall grasses are typical of their habitat, they're often called the reed or swamp cat, and they can also thrive in areas of sparse vegetation, but do not like cold areas, so they don't like the Himalayas, though they have been observed there, and they shuns rainforests and woodlands. In Turkey, they've been recorded in the wetlands of the Akarka Lagoon as well, and they've been seen in Jerusalem and the West Bank. In Iran, they've also been seen in habitats such as plains and agricultural land. In India, they're the most common small wildcat. And in Malaysia, they actually have been recorded, and there's a few jungle cat mummies actually seen in ancient Egypt, so that's quite cool. In terms of their ecology and behavior, the jungle cat is typically diurnal and hunts throughout the day. It is active, tends to be during the hot noon hours, decrease during the hot noon hours, and they rest in burrows, grass thickets, and shrubs. And often sunbays on winter days, and jungle cats have been estimated to walk about 3 to 6 kilometers or 9.9 to 3.7 miles a night, although this varies depending on the availability of prey. The behavior of the jungle cat has not been extensively studied. In solitary nature, they do not really associate with each other unless for the breeding season, and the only prominent interaction is mother-kitten bonds. So territories are maintained by urine spraying and scent marking, and some males have been observed rubbing their cheeks on objects to mark them. They are prey animals for a lot of animals, such as leopards, tigers, bears, crocodiles, dholes, golden jackals, fishing cats, large raptors, and snakes, and the main predators. And the golden jackal seems to be a major competitor for the species, but when they encounter a threat, they'll often vocalize before engaging in attack, producing small roars, which is a behavior uncommon in other members of its genus, Felis, and the meow of the cat is somewhat lower than those of a typical domestic cat. So in terms of hunting, they're primarily carnivores, so they will prey on small mammals such as gerbils, hares, and rodents, but they'll also will hunt birds. We'll have a look at the male. Because why not? So you can see some of the variety in different colours there, but they will prey on birds, fish, frogs, insects, and small snakes, and their prey typically weighs less than a kilogram, but occasionally will include mammals as large as young gazelles. And they're also unusual as they're also partly omnivorous, so they will eat fruit generally in the winter, which is interesting. So how they hunt is typically they hunt by stalking its prey, followed by sprint and leap with their sharp ears pinpointing the location of prey. They do use different techniques to secure prey. They've only observed searching for muskrats in their holes, and like the caracal, they can perform 1 or 2 high leaps in the air to grab prey. They're also efficient climbers, efficient swimmers, and they've actually been observed swimming up to 1.5 kilometers in water and plunging into water caps fish, and they have been clocked in swimming, running at about 32 kilometers or 20 miles per hour. So we'll have a look at the cute little babies. Let's have the cute little babies. Where is the cute little babies? No, we won't worry about that. We've already seen them. So both sexes become sexually mature by the time they're 1 year old. And estrus lasts about 5 days from January to March. And male spermagenesis occurs mainly from February to March, though it depends a little bit on their range. They make noisy fights in the mating season among males for dominance, and mating is similar to domestic cats. Which is, we've seen it, and vocalization and phlegm have been produced during this courtship. And after a successful copulation, they give a loud cry and reacts with aversion towards their partner, and then they separate. So gestation will last about 2 months, with births taking place for about December to June, though it might vary geographically. And before paediatrician, kind of the mother will kind of prepare a den in grass and abandoned animal burrow, hollow tree, or reed burrows. Litters will typically compose of 1 to 5 kittens, typically 2 to 3, and females will raise 2 litters a year. Kittens weigh between 43 and 55 grams, or about 1.5 to 1.5 ounces. Typically tended to be much smaller in the wild than in captivity. Initially born blind and helpless, they open their eyes about 10 to 13 days of age and are fully weaned by about 3 months. Males usually do not participate in raising kittens, however, in captivity they seem to be very protective of their offspring, and kittens begin to catch their own prey at about 6 months and leave their mother at about 8 to 9 months of age. The lifespan of a jungle cat is about 15 to 20 years, and it's possibly much higher than that in the wild, which is interesting. So it's most likely that they didn't live as long. Just in generation length is about 2.5 years, or 5.5 years, Major threats to the jungle cat includes things like habitat loss, including the destruction of dams, destruction of wetlands, dams, environmental pollution, industrialization, urbanization, and illegal hunting is a threat in Iran and Turkey, but not in Southeast Asia, partially due to high levels, and its rarity is believed to be because of its hunting. Since the 1960s, population in the Caucasus have been seen living around the Caspian Sea and have been declining, with only small populations existing today. And as I mentioned, they are considered least concern because of their wide range, and they're still relatively common, but in some areas they have declined a lot, which is really sad. Typically only small populations persisting in those areas. They are rare around Jordan, and it's highly affected by the expansion of agricultural areas around riverbeds of the Yarmouk and Jordan rivers, where farmers actually hunt and poison jungle cats in retaliation for attacking poultry. And they're considered rare and threatened in Afghanistan, but their trades have been banned. And in 1970s, they still considered used to be the most common wildcat in their villages. However, since the early 1990s, they've been rarely encountered and have suffered drastic declines due to hunting and habitat destruction. But today, they are considered in Thailand and places like that. They are considered critically endangered. And in Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam, they've been subject to hunting, with skins being occasionally recorded in border markets, with live individual typically taken from Myanmar to Cambodia and put in zoos. So luckily they are doing well across pretty much all their range, but there's lots of areas where they're not doing very well. But since they have such a large range, they seem to be doing okay-ish, which is interesting. And the jungle cat is listed under CITES Appendix 2, so it's hunting is prohibited in most places. But places like Vietnam, Bhutan, Georgia, Laos, Lebanon, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and Vietnam, there is no legal protection. And they are, as mentioned, to consider least concern, they do have a wide range, and they're still relatively common against most of their range, but some areas they're not doing so well. So I think that's probably justified, call them least threatened or near threatened, but I don't make those. I'm not the IUCN, I don't make those decisions. But anyway, you're going to be carrying on. We've got a couple birds now from Great Cakes. We're going to be having a look at the southern barred owl. So this is a really cool species. So this is the barred owl, or Strixivara, also known as the striped owl, the hoot owl, or the eight-hoot owl. These are a large species of owl and a member of the true owl family, and which is the origin of the name of taxonomy. So in terms of kind of taxonomy, we will be talking about the different subspecies, but this subspecies in particular is the Strixivara, Ventura ventrix, Georgia. So this is the southern barred owl, also called the Florida barred owl. So this is a subspecies that is found in Northern Carolina, closer to the coast, around Georgia and all of Florida. And this is actually the smallest of all three subspecies on average. The males in Florida will weigh between 681 to 800 grams, or between 1.5 to 1.7 pounds, with average of 2 samples, and while 2 females weighed about 150 to 175. So they also have the least pronounced sexual dimorphism of the other subspecies, and they're also just smaller in general, probably because of the thermal climate, since these guys are living in the warmest parts of their range. There's other couple species like the Texas bar owl as well that have different colours. So there's subspecies, but I'm not actually sure how much that'd be subspecies. There's a few that have been described different species, but I'm actually curious about what would be a subspecies, or you could just justify it as a thermal climate. And there actually is areas they are becoming invasive, as we'll get into. But yeah, description. So the barred owl is often considered like a subdued or drab in coloration, and sometimes rich compared to other sympatric owls. Overall, this owl is greyish brown or brown, just brown. The colour extends to the head, and they're scalloped with white bars in the mantle and their back, bearing some whitish spots on their coverts. The underside is like a pale grey, you can kind of see there, with some kind of throat colours and spottings with the crescent barring you can see there, which is quite interesting. The head is also fairly large, and they are rounded with no ear tufts. And the facial disc you can see there is partly greyish brown, and they have very subtle kind of concentric lines. The bill is a pale sharp yellow, and the eyes are dark brown as well. And they do have actually a well-defined eye anatomy. So, as typical of owls, the ocular anatomy is quite distinct from diurnal raptors, especially in terms of their photoreceptor cells, as they have a very large number of rod cells in their quite sensitive retina. So this basically allows them, this vision is limited or almost no light during the laboratory studies. They're shown to be similar to other owls. So they're quite good at seeing, especially in low light conditions. But these guys, as mentioned, they are kind of, nocturnal / things like that. Laboratory studies show this to be similar to the other owls, such as barn owls or long-eared owls, and the tarsal or toes are feathered up, you can see, and you can only really see the toes. The flight feathers are kind of a barred and whitish buff of brown-white, with these 4 or 5 whitish bars. And young baby owls, you can see, are covered in like a downish colour, you can kind of see there, this is in their down. But the down feathers that are fluffus brownish white with indistinct markings. They quickly become juveniles where they fledge and then become, but they sometimes will have like pinkish skin and pale blue interior as well. And they're actually quite a large species as well. So adults will measure from about 40 to 63 centimeters, or about 16 to 25 inches in length, and their wingspan ranges from 96 to 125 centimeters, or about 38 to 49 inches with the wing area. And it actually seems to be quite intermediate between owls, so they don't have really large wings, but they have remarkably small wings, probably because they've got high wing loading that resembles their hunting techniques, which they usually hunt from a perch, and they'll fly in areas that are a bit more dense, so they have that. And very interesting as well, they, like most birds of prey, they do have sexual dimorphism with the females. I don't like how people call it reverse sexual dimorphism, because it is just sexual dimorphism at the end of the day. The females are larger than the males, and they often, which is interesting. Which is quite cool. As we mentioned, the weight, the sexual dimorphism is probably pronounced in most, and then I mentioned before the subspecies as well, the southern species, which is this one, it is less pronounced, but it depends on subspecies and things like that. There's not too much difference. They are subspecies, so there's not much differences. Honestly, I would consider it mostly just a thermal cline, I guess. But yeah, these guys are powerful. They have lots of powerful vocalizations that are considered spectacular, loud, and emphatic. They are kind of hoots. The classic hoots. You get the old 8 hooter is another old name for them. And you kind of get that classic hoot where you get for, Halloween, and that's why it's part of the Halloween pack. And they do have some calls like a mumble, a grumbling, a slurred, or stuttle, like, and then an up and down tilt of the high pitch, which is quite interesting. And you can actually identify them by sex by one call, which is quite interesting. And their barred owl is mostly noisy, but peak vocalizations happens between late January in Florida and early April in Canada, so that's quite cool. So in terms of their range, so typically throughout most of the eastern United States and southern Canada, they pretty much range from Nova Scotia right the way down New England and down into Florida, and they're quite a wide range there, but they have been expanding into the Great Plains and things like that, where they're believed to become invasive with increase in forest disturbance and the places area that's sufficient habitat, which is quite interesting. So they've actually kind of moved to areas. They've actually also moved into places like Saskatchewan and Manitoba, and even Vancouver Island, just over the last kind of 100 years or so, just with the range expansion, which is quite interesting. But yeah, in terms of the habitat, they do like old growth forest, old deciduous forest and mixed forest, with kind of like lower branch diversity to hunting and things with a greater security for mobbing and things like that. So they do like those kind of hard areas. But typically they're found in all sorts of areas, like riparian areas and swamps. They are pretty generous in that regard, but they do prefer those kind of habitats. And they're not confined to extensive forests. They can be found in open woodlands or large parks, or even areas that have just been logged, which is quite interesting. But they do prefer those kind of old growth forests. Let's see if we can find... Is there one on a perch? Oh yeah, we'll have a look at you. Why not? You probably have to come jump on there, but show off some new animations. But they're quite adaptive, as I mentioned, to those habitats. Like most owls, though, they are largely nocturnal. They're typically active between 5 a.m. and 8 p.m. Juvenile barred owls recorded sleep an average of 28% of each hour. And peak times in Minnesota have been found right about sunset and just before dawn. And nonetheless, they are not fully nocturnal, and there are some areas where they'll be outside during nightfall, which is interesting. Particularly if they're like disturbed or emitting albino calls while hunting, and often daytime activity will either be early in the morning around dusk, things like that. Roost sighting is actually partly dictated by thermoregulation, so they like shadier places to reduce heat stress, and they seldom actually rely on camouflage. Instead, they often fly in least disturbance and not allowing close approaches, so they kind of just hang back and things like that. They've actually been also shown to be mobbed by smaller birds, such as like passerines, like corvids, and also woodpeckers, and mammals when they're discovered during the daytime, so they will get mobbed. In like other genera or species in this genera, they tend to be highly territorial, regardless of year. So these territories are kind of claimed by singing on from different perches, often near the perimeter of this home range, and the borders are maintained by barred owls and generally stable from generation to generation, even year to year. Territories can be determined by radio telemetry, and there seems to be, depending on area, maybe about 700 to 800 hectares. Typically, some areas will be a lot smaller, just depending on how much areas they are. Some can be as large as, like 2,000 hectares or 2,000 acres or 900 hectares. So it just depends, really. And the range pairs overlap during the breeding season. About 87 to 95% overlap during breeding, but decreases to 45 after hatching. So they'll study, they'll have duets and, try and bring stranger calls and then come together to breed. In terms of what they eat, they are opportunistic predators, so they pretty much eat what they can get. They are predominantly arboreal prey for the spotted owl, so they eat a lot of terrestrial prey. So it's kind of, niche partitioning. They usually hunt, although they usually hunt in woodlands, they will hunt in open terrain as well. They eat a lot of things like voles and hunt for stone traps, and actually use hunting methods once thought particular to great grey owls. They'll also use hunt on the ground is usually done to train invertebrates and amphibians. They've also been seen to wade in shallow water to catch fish, which is quite interesting. And due to their relatively modest foot size, they do not usually attack large prey, so they do prefer smaller prey, so they'll eat lots of little prey. But they have been seen, scavenging, eating deer or squirrel roadkill in remote areas, so they will prey on roadkill. And they pretty much just use, when they're hunting, they use constriction and the velocity of their flight to kind of cause trauma inflicted with their talons. So they actually rely on their speed and their velocity to try to just injure their prey when they grab it, which was interesting as well. They have looked into the dietary kind of things as well. They've been known to eat quite a diverse amount of animals. They'll eat small mammals, they'll eat birds, amphibians, reptiles, fish, and also consume a large amount of arthropods and things like that. Seems to be about 76% mammals, 15% invertebrates, 5% birds, and 2.5% other invertebrates as well, depending on your areas. But yeah, they'll feed a lot on things like rats, such as introduced rats, but also cotton rats, rice rats, and wood rats. And they all share that pendant of being crepuscular, so they'll come at those times, which is interesting. They also eat deer mouse and voles, squirrels, especially like western grey squirrels, and sometimes even flying squirrels, shrews and moles, cottontail rabbits sometimes, bats, weasels. They'll eat weasels and stoats and minks and skunks, and sometimes even been reported eating like possums, opossums and porcupines, and even domestic cats. It's interesting. Bird prey, as I mentioned, a little bit more kind of restricted, but they'll eat barn swallows and purple martins, things like that. Flycatchers, typically small things like finches and things like that, even hummingbirds as well. Other prey, as we mentioned, they'll eat snakes, they'll eat like timber rattlesnakes and turtles, river cooters, frogs and salamanders, bullfrogs. So they'll eat pretty much, they'll eat a wide variety of things like moths and things like that. So pretty generalist in that regard. So yeah, in terms of their reproduction, they're often prefer nesting usually in hollow trees, which is interesting. However, they will kind of snags may occur, and they'll often tend to prefer those old growth trees. Typically, nest sites are rather deep in dark wooded areas, and often in well developed understories, with sometimes sparse lower branches. And average nest height is about 6.8 to 13 meters above the ground, depending on obviously areas and things like that. A big beech tree with a rotting core is kind of like ideal, but they will just use anything that has like a nice hole in it. So they will kind of make these cavities. Usually in areas with few or non-native hollow trees, they will kind of use other birds' nests or occasionally use the drays of squirrels, which is interesting. That is a little bit more of a secure microclimate. And nests built by other birds are sometimes usually used secondarily on a local basis. So they will steal the nests of other birds. And they will take to nest boxes as well, but they're generally less ready to take them than their cousins in Europe, which is interesting as well. In normal circumstances, they will breed for life, or pair bond for life. So courting pairs are usually newly mature birds, or possibly widowed birds trying to re-establish a pair. But in courtship, they will kind of engage in nodding, bowing with half-spread wings that may wobble from side to side, with courting pairs often engaging duets, and copulation between pairs occurs in late winter, February to March, to ensure implantation. And the female enters a pre-breeding lethargy stage where she is fed by the male. And egg laying occurs in 2 to 3 day individuals or intervals. Egg laying typically begins in March and runs through April. In more tropical areas like Florida, they may occur as late December, especially for the subspecies, though 22 is laid between early January and early March. And first similar, 22 eggs were laid between the... I was carrying with that. Just depends on areas and things like that. Normally the female will lay 2 to 3 eggs, but as many as 5 as possible, where they'll kind of lay them as well in there. And they continue to brood the young for 3 weeks. Then after, while the male gathers food, she'll brood them, and then, they hatch. She'll continue to brood for about 3 weeks, and afterwards she begins to hunt for the young. The parents normally continue to hunt until they're about 6 weeks old and can fly well, but during the first 3 weeks the male does all the prey deliveries, either bringing prey directly to the nest or leaves them for the female on nest entrance. This means the mean number of density is kind of 2.4 per night, 1.4 when there's 11 to 5 day old chicks, and kind of, just making sure you get heaps, and so that works out well. They have variable responses as well to human disturbances, where some will remain sitting while a person comes to their nest, and some will, fight them off, or some, be scared off, just depending. The average hatchling weighs about 46 grams, or 1.6 ounces, and like most birds, they're born initially artificial, so they rely on their parents a lot. So basically, just covered in a down, and then as they fledge, they'll get bigger and stronger and then fledge. And fledging will typically occur at about 36 to 39 days, and after that, the both parents will continue to hunt but deliver the prey, and then they kind of will get short flights about 10 weeks, and then the longer flights begin at 14 weeks. And by the time they're hunting around early to mid-autumn, they gain their independence, and they disperse and move into different areas and try and find new areas. And this is actually the stage where there are most mortalities in owls. So usually these juvenile owls are considered floaters, going from place to place trying to find a territory. And yearlings have been known to breed, often very rarely, but usually occur at about 2 to 3 years old. So that's typically when they start breeding. So in terms of their longevity, they are a naturally long-lived bird, with some of them living 18 years, 2 months, or 24 years. So they are quite long-lived. And even captivity, they've been lived up to 34 years. Which is interesting, but most mortalities, as mentioned, is from predation. So things like eating, raccoons and eggs, eating eggs and nests and fleshlings, often things getting killed by fur-bearer traps. There's some evidence of cannibalism, also things like aspergillosis does kill them as well, or avapox as well. They do have parasites, like they have been seen to be killed by toxoplasmosis, which is another big issue as well, and other things of flatworms and things. So yeah, that is things as well. But yeah, the barred owl status, they are the most common owl in North America, and Partners in Flight established their mate to 3 million individuals, making them the second most numerous owl behind the great horned owl, and perhaps slightly ahead the more common species like barn owls and northern saltweed owls. The estimated Canada's population is about 10,000 to 50,000 pairs, and also a large population. And this species may actually be responsible for the decline of another species, the northern spotted owl, native to British Columbia, Washington, Oregon, and California. So once they've spread into those areas, they've kind of taken over that niche and caused them to decline, and they've been breeding, they've been expanding their range westward into the eastern US and Canada. So even though this expansion has been considered natural, there's actually little suggests that barred owls could have reached this range without the aid of humans, with things like increasing temperatures, wildlife suppression, and tree planting facilitating those kind of facilitating that spread from these species to the eastern side of the US, around Oregon and Manitoba and Vancouver Island. So it's believed that this has actually spread, and there's also threatened them by taking over their niche, but also interbreeding with these spotted owls. So interbreeding with them, and creating hybrids that reduces their fitness. So that's another big issue there, which is interesting as well. And yeah, really, really cool species. I'm definitely a big fan of these guys. A lot to talk about with these guys, but yeah, really, really cool. You see them flying around. How awesome. Another great one by Great Cakes. So, last but certainly not least, we've got a really, really cool guy here. We've got the American Crow. So let's have a look at these guys. As you do know, what an adult, there we are. So this is the American Crow. So the American Crow, or Corvus brachyrhinus, is a large species of passerine bird in the family Corvidae, and is a common bird throughout most of North America. They are the New World counterpart to the carrion crow and the hooded crow of Eurasia, and occupy the same kind of niche. So that's quite cool. So first described by German ornithologist Christian Ludwig Burnham in 1822, which actually means short-billed crow in Greek. As of 2012 analysis of the genetics of Corvus, they seem to have spread apart from other species about 5 million years ago. And there's a few different subspecies that are thought to be mainly just decline, so north to southeast cline, but also like the birds are smallest far western and the southern coast. So there's this eastern crow, western crow, northwestern crow, Florida crow, and southern crows. Just kind of tell you where they are. So they are quite a large, distinctive bird with iridescent black feathers along their body. Their leg and bill are also black, and they measure between 40 to 53 centimeters, or about 16 to 21 inches in length, for which the tail makes up about 40% of that as well. Their wingspan ranges as well from 85 to 100 centimeters, or about 33 to 39 inches, and their bill length is about 3 to 5.5 centimeters, or 1.2 to 2.2 inches. It's quite interesting. And their body mass is about 316 to 620 grams, or 11 to 21 ounces, with males tending to be larger than females. And the iconic caw is the American crow, that's their macaw. And the way to tell them apart from fish crows is extremely difficult and often inaccurate. Nonetheless, there are differences apart from size do exist. They tend to have more slender bills and feet than American crows. American crows tend to be bulkier. And when seen from a distance, their size is most reliable. The distinctly larger common ravens, which is the corax, can be distinguished by their long-shaped, larger-looking heads and things like that. And crows, as we mentioned, they've been noted to be extremely intelligent. They have the same body-to-weight ratio as humans, and led to some studies actually finding them to be self-aware, and that crows take time to learn from tolerant parents. And when the humans have a neocortex, they actually have a different part of their brain. So it's like convergent evolution, which is very interesting. The average lifespan for an American crow is 7 to 8 years, but captive birds have been known to live to 30 years. And their range is very wide. They now extend from the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean in Canada, to the French islands of St. Pierre and Miquelon in the United States, and into northern Mexico. The increase of trees throughout the Great Plains has actually supplemented their populations and allowed them to expand, very similar to, as we mentioned, with the barred owl. And virtually all types of country is inhabited. The only absent only in tundra, where they're replaced by the common raven. And they're a permanent resident in most of the US, but most Canadian birds will migrate south for the winter, which is interesting. And in terms of their diet, it actually is very difficult to study them because of their being able to band them and then let alone catching them. But most of their behavior is actually remains poorly studied, which is a little bit sad. But they are omnivores, so they'll feed on insects, all types, carrion, scraps of human food, nuts such as walnuts and almonds and seeds and eggs, as well as nestlings, fish, and will be active hunters and will eat mice, young rabbits, frogs, and other small animals. And during the winter, their diet actually consists mostly of nuts and acorns, and occasionally they will visit bird feeders, and one of the few species that have been observed modifying and using tools to grab food, so that's quite cool there. And like most crows, they will scavenge in landfills, scattering garbage in the process. And when available, caught wheat and other crops are a favourite one. So they're often considered a nuisance, of course. Is that a juvenile or no? That's elderly. Okay, we'll have a look at you. Why not? Since you were using that. Oh, and you just left it. Okay. So that's why you have scarecrows, to scare crows. And they're considered a nuisance. In terms of reproduction, we'll have a look at these cute little babies. Where are these cute little babies? Adult. Have a look at a little baby. Look at how cute they are, little baby. How adorable. So American crows are socially monogamous cooperative breeding birds. So their mated pairs form large families of up to 15 individuals for several breeding seasons that remain together. So a murder of crows. Offspring from a previous nesting season usually remain with the family to assist rearing new nestlings. And they do not reach breeding age of at least 2 years, and most will not leave their nest to breed at about 4 to 5 years. The nesting season will start early, with some birds incubating eggs by early April, and they'll construct bulky stick nests, nearly always in trees, but sometimes in large bushes, and very rarely on the ground. They will nest in a wide variety of trees, including large conifers, although oaks are often used. 3 to 6 eggs are laid and incubated for about 18 days. The young are usually fledged about 36 days after hatching, and predation primarily occurs at the nest site, and eggs and nestlings are frequently eaten by snakes, raccoons, ravens, and domestic cats. With adults are less frequently predated, but they do face potential attacks from great horned owls, red-tailed hawks, peregrine falcons, and eagles, and they may actually be attacked by predators such as coyotes and bobcats or carrion, but that's even rarer. And although mating between relatives can cause breeding depression, that is negative fitness to offspring as well, there is nevertheless there's a number of species that do prefer interbreeding, and these do experience, inbreeding depression, but do prefer inbreeding, which is interesting. In terms of their West Nile virus, they're actually easy to come to that as well. So that's another big issue. And it's originally a mosquito-borne African virus that has been caused, epicelitis in humans and livestock since 2000, and it was actually introduced into America in 1999, so that has become an issue for the crows. Despite this decline, they are considered a species of least concern. They're still doing well, and actually a sentinel species, so you can tell if West Nile virus is common because these guys are particularly susceptible to it. And as I mentioned as well, often, since they are crows, they are very, very intelligent. They are highly cunning. In other corvids, they're very intelligent. They've been able to steal food, often in creative ways. They've been seen stealing fish from otters by picking the tail and distracting it. They've been seen using tools, very similar to species like the New Caledonian crow, using tools, using problem solving. So they're very, very intelligent birds. And the intelligence and adaptability of the species has insulated it from a lot of threats, and even considered a pest. And the population is estimated to be about 31 million, though there's even with the effects of West Nile virus. So they're thought to be least concerned and are not threatened with extinction. And they've been killed in large numbers by humans, both by recreation and part as organised extermination. And in Canada, they have no protections, where there's ban at hunting them during the nest season, only in Quebec. But laws of them hunting varied in the states. Some have limited hunting speed in seasons, unless they're agricultural pests, in case they may be killed. And in the first half of the 20th century, they actually kind of dynamited roosting sites and may have killed about 3.8 million birds. But the effects of the population was negligible, and damage to crops did not decrease, so it was considered ineffective. So you just got to be careful, you know, even though they're still quite common, you just got to protect your crops. Non-deadly methods of managing crows varies, but usually limited in their effectiveness. High-value crops may be netted, but this cost prohibitive for most other crops. Frightening may be used, including loud noise, scarecrows, fake hawks flown on balloons, fake owls that move in the wind, things like that. Poison baits are limited effectiveness, but only the most toxic baits work, and they're generally considered unacceptable to use. You know, it's not ethical. Crows will quickly also learn to avoid these less toxic baits and the baits that make them sick, because they are so intelligent. And it's just there may be actually a benefit to farmers as they eat insect pests and chase livestock predators like hawks. So they may actually be a little bit more useful than we give them credit for. But yeah, really, really awesome. Nice to see these guys. Is there one sitting on the jungle gym? This is one of the new enrichments as well. So there's like a new jungle gym that Great Cakes has made, and the birds will use it. But yeah, it's brilliant. Do really love these guys. Nice to talk about crows for a change. And I love all these birds that everyone's making. So yeah, I think this is a great place to end the video. So thank you, Noala, for all your tarantulas. And thank you, Great Cakes, for making the Halloween pack. You know, keeping that festive season alive is truly brilliant. So, yeah, I really, really, really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I hope you guys like and subscribe. Always look at the little bell icon to get notified of anything. So if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye.